Hi, welcome back to the studio of Art by Wendy. I'm Wendy Mould. Today, we're going to talk about pumpkins. For some reason, when October comes, pumpkins call to me. And I don't mean just pumpkin pie, which, by the way, is my favorite. I mean in an artsy way. Drawing and painting pumpkins is an awesome way to practice drawing with confidence and learn more about color and composition. Today I'm going to use my pumpkins drawings to find out something about my two new colors that I've added to the palette. Quinacridone Coral and Viridian Green. The Quin Coral, I've added a cold yellow to it and a warm yellow to it, and I've also put my cadmium orange with it just to compare to see what kind of oranges I would get. The Viridian Green, I've added my hot and cold yellows to it, as well as cobalt blue and ultramarine. So now let's get to the pumpkins and see how these are going to work out. So I set up a drawing of my pumpkins, and it's a nice little 5x7 sheet of paper. And notice I've taped it off with a 3/8 of an inch border all the way around it. I really like to do that because it gives it that nice white edge when you're all finished. I also like to include a few leaves whenever I draw pumpkins, for real pumpkins that is, not cartoon ones, because I like the contrast of the pumpkins with the curly leaves, and they're quite floppy and fun to do. So things are set up and ready to go. So now I'm ready to put on some color. And first of all, I'm starting off with some of that coral just to see what it looks like. And I'm putting it in the darker areas in case I want to lighten it or change it. And just kind of testing it, adding a few other colors to give some interest to my pumpkins. Of course, pumpkins aren't all just straight orange. I want to have a little bit of the aging look. Some of them are more mature than the others. So adding just colors and variations of yellows to orange to that rosy coral color, and just getting things going in that area. I also wanted, of course, to have a bit of green in there because it does reflect the green from the leaves, and it helps to tie things together and just makes it all more interesting, I think. From there, I'm also thinking in terms of the fact that I'm going to be putting a layer on afterwards. This is just the first layer, and remember, watercolor dries a lot lighter than what you first thought it was going to be. And you can see I've got some different kinds of yellows and things like that. The layers are light. Even as I'm going, I can see that I'm using that coral quite a bit, as I do kind of like it. And I like how the transition from the yellow to orange to the coral gives me the from light to dark sense, and the volume it gives my pumpkins. So I am starting to like it, although I must admit, as it dries, it doesn't have quite the same shine and color to it. But we'll see how that works out. Softening the edges. Notice the transition colors have all been softened. I went back with just a damp brush and kind of softened and blended the changes of colors. And now I'm playing with a bit of that viridian into the stalks of the pumpkins and into the leaves. I've decided to do the leaves with 2 layers. And first of all, I'm putting this light layer, which is the Irelium, that cold yellow, mixed with the Viridian. And so it's going to be the sort of the lime green kind of part of the leaves. And then as you can see now, I'm going back and doing the center part with the Viridium. And I experimented with both the ultramarine and the cobalt blue, mixing it with that Viridian. And it does give you a nice dark green, which really is going to, I think, sets off the 2 colors that I want in the leaves nicely. So in that sense, I'm kind of liking those colors, but I'm not sure just yet. Certainly can see how they're going to work out. Once I finish putting the leaves in place, then I'm starting to think about what I'm going to do for shadow colors on my pumpkins. And today I decided I would use the ultramarine blue And here I'm putting a little bit of shadow of the leaf onto the pumpkin, some of the shadows in the grooves, and I'm looking for the darker spots. At this point, I again am just kind of feeling my way. So I've sort of got my mid-tone for my shadow color, mid-blues, and I can go back later and really punch it up in the really darkest areas. But first I'll get the lighter areas done, blend some of the edges, and notice I keep going back and forth from one pumpkin to the other, because as things dry, I can go back and just kind of blend with a damp brush and get those edges softer so that they're not so harsh, and a more gradual change rather than a quick harsh line between the colors. And also I'm doing a little bit of glazing there. Notice I'm putting another layer of paint on some of them, just a thin layer to kind of change, darken the yellows, add more to the coral, give it more depth, and blend in the colors. So sometimes I'm glazing with the coral on the coral, sometimes a bit of orange over the yellow, sometimes a bit of a yellow over the green. The next thing, of course, is dealing with the background. I decided to make a suggestive background. It could have been a pattern background, it could have been a graphic background, but I decided I would make it a little bit of an idea of the pumpkins in the field. So I'm adding some colors, and at the same time I'm throwing in the colors that are in the foreground and sort of suggesting that there might be some pumpkins back there, there's some leaves, there's some foliage, that type of thing. So it's really I've decided to go with the idea of my pumpkins are in the field. And so that's why I've chosen that kind of a background. However, it could have been any other thing. As I say, it could be graphic lines, for example, could be any kind of a thing. Whichever appeals to you. And again, it gives me a chance to play with those colors that I want to learn more about and see how they fit in to what's happening. So along with the background, I'm of course doing the foreground as well, and it's going to be the ground and the muddiness. And again, I'm using that ultramarine for my darks and just kind of dropping it in. And if you'll notice, I'm actually even using two paintbrushes. One has the ultramarine in it, and one has the burnt sienna. So rather than mixing on my palette, I'm actually mixing on the paper, kind of dropping it in wherever it looks like it needs to be, and just giving me some shadows. And at the same time, the shadows are blending and have very soft edges. As you do that, you have to really control your water and make sure that the paper is not too wet. Again, a great practicing activity. So now I've come to the last part where I'm just going around and finishing things up. I noticed I didn't have a shadow under that one leaf, and so now I'm just adding the shadow there, maybe darkening the shadows underneath the pumpkin. In some areas it should be quite dark, and so that's just about dry now, so I can add another layer. So I'm just kind of moving around and adding little touches where I see that something is needed. I hope your pumpkins are coming along nicely. Well, my pumpkins are pretty well done. And now looking at them, I can see there's things I like, things I don't like. I must admit at first I didn't like the coral, the quin coral, but actually I really enjoy the shadow color that it provides. And so I actually went back and put another light coat of the coral just in the shadow areas because I really like what's happening there. I also like using the blue as my shadow color, and it has a nice contrast with that coral, and I really like what's happening. The Viridian green, some of the greens I like this kind of green here and this here, but I do found it was hard to get a dark green. Like even in here I mixed the both cobalt and ultramarine, but I couldn't get this quite as dark as I would have liked it. So I think I'm still going to play around with these colors. I can certainly see some things I like and some things I don't like. In the meantime, just take the paper off, because it always looks much nicer when you don't have the paper on it, or sorry, the tape, and you have that nice little border. So, doesn't that look nicer? There's my little pumpkins. And again, have fun playing with pumpkins and color in October. See you next time. Have a great day. Wendy teaches outdoor sketching classes in the summer, and she teaches in her studio and online throughout the year. Wendy produces original work in pencil and in watercolor. She completes commission work, particularly pet portraits, and produces cards and prints from some of her work.